This past Dr. Martin Luther King Day has been a pivotal moment to reflect on the legacy of Dr. King, on the current state of race relations, and a path forward. We discussed this and much more with the Gloucester County and the Atlantic City NAACP. It's all here on the next Latino Motion. Join us.
Choose quality, value, distinction. Choose Stockton.
Latino Motion with Bert Lopez is presented by Latino Motion Public Affairs Media, a New Jersey nonprofit corporation, and Stockton University. This edition of Latino Motion with Bert Lopez is brought to you by the HD Studios at the campus of Stockton University. Funding for Latino Motion is provided by Atlanticare, healthcare you can believe in. Atlantic City Electric, energy for a changing world. And South Jersey Gas. Welcome to Latino Motion, a weekly interview show highlighting issues impacting New Jersey's Latino community while advancing understanding of Latino cultural heritage and contributions to our society. And here is your host, Bert Lopez.
Buenos dias and welcome to Latino Motion. As we celebrated the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King, many of us reflected on the current state of race relations in this country. In this pivotal junction in our country's history, the work of the NAACP is just as important as ever. Joining me to discuss their reflections on the path going forward is Loretta Winters and Tiffany Grandison with the Gloucester County NAACP, and also Councilman and President with the Atlantic City NAACP, Kaleem Shabazz. Welcome all to Latino Motion.
Thank you, Bert.
Thank you.
And this has been a very busy week with the celebration of Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday and a lot of the things that are happening in the country. Let's start off with some of the news that happened over the weekend with the back and forth with the civil rights icon, John Lewis, and essentially some of the statements that we heard from the president-elect. What are your reflections? And let's start with you, Loretta, with President of the NAACP in Gloucester County.
Yes. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for inviting me to the show. It's always a pleasure to be here. John Lewis, the icon that he is in the civil rights movement, I thought was very disrespected. We're in a country where we have freedom of speech, and I think freedom of speech is being violated because we can't express how we feel with the president-elect that we have. Either he needs, the constitutional law needs to, somebody needs to at least talk to him, and he has to be presidential with his responses. The knee-jerk reactions to comments cannot continue. It can continue. In my opinion, I think that if this continues like this, the way that he's interacting with our federal officials and global officials, it's far-fetched, but I can see World War III starting.
This is nothing new, right?
Right, it's nothing new.
We're seeing this time and time again. But this particular weekend, as we celebrate the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King, it certainly brings home some of those old feelings and certainly reaction within the African-American community and minority communities. At the same token, we had Martin Luther King's son, the third, meet with President-elect Trump Towers, and that seemed to have been a good discussion. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, Bert, again, let me say I'm very glad to be here on your show. I think what our president-elect needs is a crash course in urban America, a crash course in race relations, a crash course in intergroup dynamics, and hopefully he can come up to speed on where we're at in America. He has the viewpoints of a 70-year-old man who is in a silo and only deals with people on a certain level, and he doesn't really see where we're at in 2017 and where we're going forward. And it's a very critical issue because it impacts everyone, and hopefully he will be open-minded enough to take tutoring and to take input And I'm troubled by some of his assertions, especially with Congressman Lewis. They're just not factual. I mean, he has a right to his own opinion, but as Senator Monahan used to say, everyone has a right to their own opinion, but don't have a right to their own facts. And he's factually incorrect with his viewpoint of urban America, African Americans, Hispanics, LGBT, and so many other groups. And hopefully we can bring him up to speed, or we're going to have a lot of problems in our country.
Tiffany, at the same token, I know you appreciate good phrases like "we the people." His daughter, that Martin Luther King's daughter, Bernice King, indicated that we can't triumph over Trump, and she discussed about building bridges. How critical is that?
At this point, that is extremely critical, and that is what we need to concentrate on right now. He's going to be sworn in. It's already set in motion. So now it's, what are we going to do? How are we going to rally together and support each other, as a whole community, not just the Latino community and the Black community? How are we all going to stand up against Trump? And at the end of the day, what we're fighting against is his lack of judgment, his lack of respect for his elders, for the disabled community, everywhere. And so we need to stop looking at it as an I problem and stand up for each other and fight it.
And Loretta, do you see building bridges as a possibility under Trump?
I believe it is a possibility that we can, if once he settles down and realizes the position that he's taken and the importance of the position that he has. I think he's still in la-la land as far as, thinking what's going on, and it's not reality yet, but it'll be reality soon. And as soon as it gets in, I think we can build some bridges and not build walls, no pun intended.
And Kaleem, there's a lot of concern within the community, African American community, Latino community. What advice do you give to members of the community at this point?
Well, I think where we're at, Bert, is this is a challenge and an opportunity at the same time. It's obviously a challenge when you have the most powerful man in the world, who's the President of the United States, has these views that are so out of the mainstream and so radical, and when he surrounds himself with people of the same ilk, that's a challenge. But it's also an opportunity, and I think it's an opportunity for those of us in the civil rights community to redouble our efforts, to rededicate ourselves to the principles, the values of the NAACP and other groups, to forge coalitions and partnerships. We're working right now in Atlantic City with the ADL. On a national level, our president, President Brooks, and the national ADL has formed a coalition and a partnership to work together. We're going to do the same thing on the local level with the ADL, which is the Anti-Defamation League. Historically, the Anti-Defamation League and many parts of the Jewish community has been in a partnership with the African American community for civil rights. I think we have to go back to those days and expand it to Hispanics, to LGBT, to handicap. And it's not so much what President-elect Trump thinks, it's the fact that there are many millions of Americans who mirror his opinion. And the fact that when he says these things that are so outrageous.
It's not just about Donald Trump.
We have
a much bigger problem. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to continue the discussion. We'll be right back with more Latino Motion.
Latino Motion with Bert Lopez is presented by Latino Motion Public Affairs Media, a New Jersey nonprofit corporation. Join us online at www.latinomotion.tv. Find us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. We encourage your comments and contributions for show topics.
Welcome back to Latino Motion. We'll continue our discussion with Loretta Winters, Tiffany Grandison, and Colleen Shabazz with the NAACP of Gloucester County and Atlantic City. And we were just talking about Dr. Martin Luther King's legacy and some of the reflections that we have with this current turning point in our history. And one of the things we talked about was the building of bridges, how critical that is. And let's just continue that discussion. What would it take? Tiffany, we'll start with you. What would it take to start mending fences and trying to start building bridges?
That's a a really hard question because everyone has to do their part. I can't just sit here and say, well, we need more education and, Trump needs to be more sensitive. I know for me personally, it had to do with being empathetic, to understand why people do what they do. Why did they vote the way that they voted? That then allowed me to say, okay, well, I understand where you're coming from. So now maybe there's not that much hurt or disappointment behind how I'm going to move forward with you. So it's reflection.
And Loretta, I know that you have a big effort with empowerment and getting people to go out and vote, very critical. What did you say? Did this past election, did that effort fail?
Absolutely. I believe it did fail. I know a lot of people who did not vote because they didn't like the candidates. And my thing is, we've come too far. People died. People's homes were burnt and hung and tarred and feathered, and people were put in concentration camps right here in the United States so that they could not vote. They were ID'd, whether they were Japanese and Chinese, whatever, Latinos, blacks. You could not vote. And we fought for this. And for us to lightly say, well, I don't like the candidate, so I'm not voting. It's unacceptable. It's not an option. I don't care if you vote for Casper the ghost. You're going to vote. You have to vote. And it's, the strategy that was used did not work. The only strategy that's a proven strategy is to get out there and vote. So I can't say unequivocally that, non-voting does not work. This is a perfect example. We have to do better. We have to do better educating our youth. We have to do better getting our seniors out.
I want to talk a little bit more about the youth, but Kaleem, in your viewpoint, what's the role of the NAACP in empowering minorities and getting people motivated to go out and vote?
I think Reverend Dennis Blackwell, who was one of our speakers at our NAACP program, said that the role of faith-based institutions and civil rights institutions is to educate people about the electoral system and not just voting, or the voting, as President Winter says, is very important, but we have to get people to realize the issues behind voting and what's important and how to develop issues. So I think where we have to go is back into the old time organizing, where we get people together in groups and explain to them the issues and how to organize and what's important and how to evaluate a candidate. And there's a whole gap between those of us who went through the civil rights struggle and went through the struggles to vote and people nowadays who don't have that history, and we have to reconnect that.
We just had a report issued by the Justice Department regarding abuses by police. And now with the president-elect coming on board, calling for law and order, do you see things getting worse in the minority communities as far as police relations is concerned?
We have to do what we have to do. We need to have be engaged more, have better relationships with our police department and our elected officials. That's the only way that's going to happen. I do believe that politics is local, and we have to continue that way.
And I know in your chapter, you do have an effort with the Sheriff's Department and police to do recruitment.
We do recruitment. And, one of the things that I found out with the recruitment, I recruited for state police on the state level. I recruited during the local level. And one of the things that I really found out was that it's twofold. If the police department is not hiring, one of the reasons why they're not hiring is because we're not applying. So you have to apply in order to get hired. And I went out and I talked to some young men who were college graduates, unemployed, and they said, Miss Winters, I can't go home and tell my mom that I'm going to be a police officer. I can't say that I'm going to be this. I said, but you're unemployed. It's a great career. How are you going to change it unless you get inside internally to change it? And they would say, I can't, they'll think I'm a turncoat.
We have a lot to overturn and overcome.
We have a lot to do. We have a lot of work to do as the NAACP in changing the mindset of the community, the mindset of the police, bridging that gap that's there.
Thank you. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to continue this discussion. We'll be right back with more Latino Motion.
Latino Motion with Bert Lopez is presented by Latino Motion Public Affairs Media, a New Jersey nonprofit corporation. Join us online at www.latinomotion.tv. Find us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. We encourage your comments and contributions for show topics.
Welcome back to Latino Motion. We continue our discussion with Loretta Winters, Tiffany Grandison, and Colleen Shabazz with the NAACP. Very lively discussion we've had, and certainly the two chapters, the Gloucester County as well as the Atlantic City chapter, are very much engaged in the community. I'm going to start with you, Colleen. Tell me some of the activities and some of the events that you are carrying out through your chapter to get the community engaged.
This year we're going to start a new tradition in Atlantic City. We're going to have a day of remembrance for Dr. King, and we're going to have our youth. We have a very active youth contingent. They're going to be involved. We're going to reach out, and we already have to the Stockton NAACP to have their involvement the day that we continually observe the life and times of Dr. King. And April 22nd is a Saturday. It's going to be our Freedom Fund breakfast where we bring the community together to talk about what the NAACP is doing and to raise much needed funds for the NAACP. So we're looking forward to those two specific activities. The third one we're going to do, we're going to start hopefully a community training institute where we'll bring the community together to actually train people about political issues, not from a partisan point of view, but from a point of view of the NAACP as to how people should be mobilizing and organizing, and how they should, not who they should vote for, but what criteria they should use in selecting the candidate to vote.
Yeah, very good. And Loretta, how about in the Gloucester County chapter?
In the Gloucester County chapter, we have quite a few events coming up. On the 26th of January, we have a health event. We partnership with Virtua, and about quarterly each year, we do a free dinner, a forum with 3 or 4 doctors, and we talk about different health issues. And then we're going to have a topic called Engage, which we're going to be working with NOBLE, the National Association of Black Law Executives, and the Zetas, one of the Divine Nines. We get together on a yearly basis and we train the community on how to interact with police. Matter of fact, we have 3 or 4 police chiefs and departments come in locally and also participate. And that's an excellent event for the youth.
Sounds like you have a lot on your plate, and we'll put those events up on the screen. And one of the things that, Colleen, you mentioned about the youth, very critical. And I know that your chapter very much engaged with the youth. How critical is it that we get the youth engaged in the NAACP?
The way that I look at it is that our youth needs to learn their history. They need to understand it and appreciate it so they can respect, what they have. And if you're not being challenged, then you're being complacent. And for the past couple of generations, our youth have been complacent because everything is given to them, and they think, oh, we have a black president, everything's fine, and all of our black athletes get paid so much money, everything's fine. But this is the time of challenge. So this is going to be an important moment for all of our chapters and our schools to lead our youth in the right direction so that they can make a difference moving forward.
You have a project with AXO for the youth. Tell me a little bit about that, Loretta.
AXO, I am so proud of our AXO. Matter of fact, this is, I don't even think the state knows it yet, but our AXO department is Afrocentric, cultural, technological, scientific Olympics. And it's basically an Olympics of the minds. The STEM program is very deep in AXO. There's 7 regions in the United States. We're in Region 2. Region 2 is all the New England states. It's Pennsylvania, it's New York, it's New Jersey, and it's Delaware. Out of the 7 regions, this is the first time National has done that. They want 2 youths from each region and they're going to pay airfare, overnight stay to go to the NAACP Image Awards in California this year. In Region 2, we have cities like Boston and Newark and Philadelphia and New York City. Well, little old Gloucester County was chosen in this Region 2 to send 2 of their AXO students to represent.
Congratulations.
Thank
And
you.
also, congratulations. You're also one of the officers for the state chapter, and give my regards to Richard Smith as well.
I sure will.
Well,
I sure will.
This has been very good discussion. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
joining us on Latino Motion. And thank you for joining us at home once again here on Latino Motion.
Choose quality, value, distinction. Choose Stockton.
Funding for Latino Motion is provided by Atlanticare, healthcare you can believe in. Atlantic City Electric, energy for a changing world. And South Jersey Gas.